In every single anime universe, there seems to be an almost limitless amount of ways to get strong. But kind of like the most simple-minded person you know playing a FromSoft game, I'll be damned if every single anime doesn't have some kind of equivalent of, oh, me got big arms so me smash things now. And you know what? Every single time it hits. Whether it's Alexander Armstrong punching things into different things in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Rock Lee kicking people so hard they involuntarily dab, or people like Uvogin training their right jab so much that the impact is compared to that of a ballistic missile, sometimes the best powers are the simplest ones. Sometimes it's nice to throw all your points in strength, grab two of Guts' swords, and lion claw your way through a campaign. However, in some universes, me punchy hard actually gets a bit complicated. And in no universe is that more true than Hunter x Hunter. See, because in Hunter x Hunter, as a Nen user, you can fall into 6 categories: transmutation, conjuration, specialization, manipulation, emission, and enhancers. With enhancement not only being the most common Nen category that we see people fall into, but also being well known as the most well-rounded Nen category that somebody can fall into, as its distance from specialization on the Nen chart allows for enhancers to be good at a bunch of different Nen categories. And because of this, even though enhancers should be the most straightforward Nen users in all of Hunter x Hunter, a lot of the most powerful enhancers in the Hunter x Hunter universe have abilities that are a lot more complicated than me punchy hard. I mean, not Uvogin, but that's probably why Kurapika brought a shovel. And today, I want to talk about those enhancers. These characters who should be simple, but objectively aren't. Because today, I want to talk about the top 10 strongest enhancers in the Hunter x Hunter universe, ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video a week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series in the fourth wall link in my description below. We are on to the Chunin exams, and Rock Lee is smacking the flavor out of Sasuke's mouth. So you guys are probably thinking, Nick, I know who the top 10 enhancers in Hunter x Hunter are. You don't need to make this video. But no, you're wrong, because there's a couple of entries on this list from the manga that have never been shown in the anime. New entries into the world of powerful enhancers that I believe deserve their time in the sun.
But Nick, who could you possibly be talking about?
Well, none other than one of the most recent characters introduced into the story of Hunter x Hunter, a member of the Haley family. At our number 10 spot, we have Dogman. But Nick, who's Dogman, some of you ask? Well, outside of maybe being Togashi's self-insert OC into Hunter x Hunter, which is alarming, Dogman is the highest leveled member of the Haley family. And for those of you who don't remember how the Haley family works and how Marina's Nen ability works, basically after Marina swaps spit with somebody, they fall under the purview of her Nen ability, which allows them to, assuming they kill people, level up. And when those people who have had the pleasure of kissing Marina eventually hit level 20, they unlock a Nen ability. Now, Dogman is a level 62, which either means he's killed 62 civilians or some other odd combination of dignitaries, soldiers, or bodyguards that somehow amassed him 62 total points. But Nick, how can you put Dogman anywhere on this list? I mean, his enhancer ability is literally tied to his smell. And yeah, you're right, Dogman's enhancer ability does allow for him to sniff out other Nen users, allowing him to sniff out somebody's Nen type from 5 meters away and being able to sniff out if they've trained in Nen from 2 meters away, making him a pretty important asset in the Haley family in terms of reconnaissance. And while that's all we really know about Dogman, we do know before he was presumably a mass serial killer, he was also a professional wrestler, which explains why he's so big and so muscular. On top of this, we understand because his level in the Haley family is so ridiculously high that his aura amount and output level have massively increased from when he was a level 20. And considering the fact that Dogman, out of all of the members of the Haley family, is actually the closest to reaching level 100, at which point he also basically becomes another Marina, as anybody he kisses would also be under the effect of Marina's Nen ability, and when they killed 20 people, they would get a Nen ability of their own. It's a murderous contagion-based Nen ability. But anyways, it's safe to assume, on account of the fact that he is the highest level member of the Haley family, even higher than Marina, who upon my last checking, I believe is a level 45, and assuming the role that the Haley family is gonna play in the conclusion of the Succession Contest arc, then it'd be pretty insane if Dogman, one of the more powerful enhancers on the Black Whale, wasn't actually one of the most powerful enhancers in the Hunter x Hunter universe. But simply based off the fact that we really haven't seen anything from Dogman outside of him sniffing people, I can't reasonably put him much higher than number 10 on this list. But you know who I can put higher than number 10 on this list? Our number 9 entry, Goto. Yes, the Zoldyck's head butler is taking our number 9 spot.
Oh, but Nick, Goto lost to Hisoka.
Yeah, but he was in the fight to begin with. See, Goto was born in Meteor City, like a vast amount of the Phantom Troop, and thus he was born into a society that immediately hardened him, as legally he did not exist. See, we know that Goto, as one of the Zoldyck butlers, has to be at least strong enough by himself to open at least one of the testing gates, implying that he has the strength to push open at least a 2,000-pound door. On top of this, in the 2011 anime, Goto is shown bending metal bars with his bare hands. And while Goto definitely has been outsped by a couple people in the Hunter x Hunter universe, he was able to fire coins at Hisoka with such speed that Hisoka was required to use his bungee gum to stop him. And when Hisoka fired those coins back at Goto, he was able to shoot every single one of those coins out of the sky. On top of this, he is unable to keep up with Killua, and Killua uses speed of lightning, but Killua is one of the fastest people in the universe, so we can't really hold that against Goto. And while yes, Goto is tricked by Hisoka while the two of them are having their one-on-one, as Hisoka uses his bungee gum to fire a distractionary coin at Goto, so that Goto doesn't realize that Hisoka is above him, giving Hisoka a window to slice Goto's neck and kill him. Goto is able to keep Hisoka, one of the strongest people in the universe, at bay for a fair amount of time. Not only launching his thrown cards out of the air, but also deducing exactly how bungee gum works, and adding a rifling effect to his fired coin that allowed for them to almost cut through the elastic effect of bungee gum. But ultimately, Goto does come up short in a battle against Hisoka, which is actually kind of a trend on this list. Because coming up at our number 8 spot, we have another person who came up short in a battle against Hisoka, Castro. Castro is kind of a throwaway character in Hunter x Hunter, but he is an incredibly powerful Nen user who got all the way up to the 200th floor of Heaven's Arena, and was strong enough to be considered a legitimate rival to Hisoka, who also had clear and legitimate plans to become a floor master of Heaven's Arena. It's something that people like Chrollo and Hisoka have achieved, so that's the level of power we're talking about here. And while I know number 8 seems pretty low for somebody who had legitimate aspirations of becoming a floor master, it's not like he became a floor master, and it's not like he ever beat Hisoka in a fight. See, in the Heaven's Arena arc, Castro says that him and Hisoka fought 2 years ago, and that in that fight, Hisoka baptized Castro. And while it is impressive that Castro was able to survive that initial fight against Hisoka, we don't exactly know how that fight went down for Castro. But we do know how the second fight went down for Castro. And while Castro was able to use the combination of his Tiger Bite Fist, combined with his double ability, which is a combination of conjuration and manipulation, to land a flurry of opening blows on Hisoka before Hisoka realized that Castro was creating a double in order to trick Hisoka into believing that Castro was throwing feints that somehow Hisoka wasn't able to dodge, Castro was able to get up 4-0 on Hisoka in a Heaven's Arena match. Ties into the fact that Castro's enhancement abilities were so great that he was able to use his Tiger Bite Fist in enhancement technique to rip off both of Hisoka's arms, even though Hisoka was kind of just offering them up. Ripping off one of Hisoka's arms, even though he was willingly giving them up, is not something a lot of enhancers in the Hunter x Hunter universe would have been able to do. Tie this into the fact that Castro is supposed to represent the fact that people in certain Nen specialties should focus on their specific Nen specialty rather than focusing on other Nen specialties, and Hisoka stated that if Castro had simply focused on training as an enhancer, then he would have stood as a legitimately possibly dangerous opponent for Hisoka to fight, with an aura so legitimately menacing that Killua in the Heaven's Arena arc identified him as somebody he would not want to fight. So is Castro mostly known for losing to Hisoka? Yeah, 100%, but he's also done a lot more damage on Hisoka than pretty much anybody we've ever seen fight Hisoka outside of Chrollo. So I believe he deserves our number 8 spot. But just because he had aspirations of becoming a floor master and had a pretty clear path to achieving that goal, doesn't mean that other people who never really had those kinds of aspirations are any weaker than Castro. Which is why at our number 7 spot, we have Nobunaga. See, Nobunaga is undoubtedly one of the weaker members of the Phantom Troop. In fact, amongst all of the enhancers in the Phantom Troop, he ranked in dead last in the arm wrestling competition, which is kind of embarrassing when you consider the fact that non-enhancers like Hisoka, Franklin, Machi, and Chrollo all ranked higher than him. Even Bonolinov ranked higher than Nobunaga in the arm wrestling competition, something that he as a straight-up enhancer should have had pretty locked. But that doesn't change the fact that Nobunaga is one of the Phantom Troop's frontline fighters, one of the first people sent into any kind of combat situation alongside Phaeton and Phinks. On top of this, when Killua first saw Nobunaga in York New City. In order to convey the strength of Nobunaga to Gon, Killua described him as Hisoka. And while no sane person would try to say that Nobunaga is as strong as Hisoka, the comparison still holds to some degree. And while Nobunaga may not be the strongest member of the Phantom Troop, very powerful Nen users like Henry, the underboss of one of the most powerful mafias in all of the Kakin Empire, identified that he would stand no chance in combat against any of the spiders. But here's the thing. Nobunaga has been identified as a 1v1 expert, like a slightly racist 13-year-old on Modern Warfare 2 screaming at you to 1v1 them on Rust. And this is because Nobunaga is a master of EI. See, Nobunaga's fighting style employs N, where Nobunaga makes a bubble of N around him that is exactly as large as his arm with his outstretched blade. Anything that penetrates this N, Nobunaga is able to cut down immediately. However, that means he's not the world's best offensive threat, though they didn't stop him from killing the weenie, a member of the Haley family, in literally the blink of an eye. And while Nobunaga hasn't necessarily done anything all that impressive, pretty much just laying the smackdown on a non-fully realized Gon and Killua, the fact that he feels legitimately no stress in pressing the Haley family, regardless of being unaware of how any of their technique works, seems to imply that he has a pretty high level of strength. And while he may not be the strongest enhancer in the Phantom Troop, in fact, he's probably the weakest, being a member of the Phantom Troop at all is pretty impressive. But for the moment, on account of the fact that really the only person of any import that we've seen Nobunaga kill was Squala, and even relative Nen noobs like Tremblem of the Haley family were able to react to the attack of Nobunaga and block them, we really can't put him that high on this list. But hey, here's to hoping one day we get to see his Hatsu. Up next after Nobunaga, we have another entry from the Phantom Troop coming up at number 6, because at number 6 we have Phinks. Now, Phinks is a real enhancer, straight up and down. Phinks' Nen ability, Ripper Cyclotron, operates like a cheap BB gun. The more he cranks his arm, the stronger his punches are, with 15 clockwise rotations being enough to easily destroy the body of a chimera, and though he estimates that only half of those spins would have been necessary to do the same job. However, even when Phinks isn't cranking it, we have seen some absolutely insane feats out of it, like in the York New City arc when he flew through an entire army of mafiosos and snapped their necks along the way. On top of this, we saw that Phinks' level of strength allowed him to go toe-to-toe with the likes of a trained assassin in Killua with relative ease, blocking every single one of Killua's kicks and snagging him by the ankle with such force that it literally ripped the skin off his leg. But pretty much the most impressive thing that we've ever seen from Phinks was his battle in the Chimera Antarc, where he battled against a squadron leader in Zazan and was able to defeat her even after she assumed her monstrous form. Even Kaluto, another trained assassin from the Zoldyck family, identified Phinks as stronger than them. Tie all this into the fact that Phinks has been identified as the second physically strongest person in the Phantom Troop, only below Uvogin. And yeah, well, he might seem a little bit straightforward. Sometimes straightforward is all you need. However, he's still not the strongest enhancer in the Phantom Troop. Well, I guess he is and now, but for a long time, the strongest enhancer in the Phantom Troop was none other than Uvogin, our number 5 entry on this list. See, it is a well-known fact that Uvogin is the physically strongest member of the Phantom Troop. He was as enhancer gets. A huge, muscular man who imposed the Nen restriction on himself that made his right straight as strong as the impact of a ballistic missile. A man who, by himself, was able to kill 3 members of the Shadow Beasts while paralyzed from the neck down. Yeah, the Shadow Beast, the elite kill force of the 10 Dons, the head of all of the most important mafia families in the V6 countries, well, I guess that time it was the V5 countries, died in combat to Uvogin, who only had control over his head. See, because whether it was biting chunks out of their skulls, yelling so loud that it melted the inside of their brains, or spitting chunks of skulls that he bit out of the other members' heads through the other members' heads, killing them instantly, Uvogin's premier fight immediately sets him in a league far above any other Nen user we had seen up until that moment in time. And listen, while Uvogin is best remembered as the guy who was on the losing end of a fight that the other person brought a shovel to, I mean, the man could rip apart humans with the swing of his arm. He caught a bullet in his teeth. He got shot with a rocket launcher and was fine. He could throw rocks a mile with high precision to act as sniper bullets. He could bite through the skulls of incredibly competent Nen users. And with his Big Bang impact, he was able to mimic the explosive power of a small ballistic missile. missile. If it weren't for the combination of the Shadow Beast and Kurapika attacking him within a small period of time, and the fact that Kurapika has 2 chains dedicated to just killing the spiders, Uvogin probably would have killed Kurapika. I mean, he shattered his arm. And mind you, Uvogin shattered Kurapika's arm while he was using Emperor Time, a specialist ability that makes Kurapika one of the most broken Nen users in the universe. As really our first introduction to what a high-level enhancer could do, Uvogin's strength was absolutely impressive. You know, until the shoveling. Anyway, speaking of incredibly impressive enhancers, coming up at our number 4 spot, we have Youpi, also known as Menthuthu Youpi, the dumbest name in Hunter x Hunter. While Youpi doesn't really do all that much, he never really has a fight that gets completed. Pretty much everything that Youpi does do is wildly impressive. See, not only was he able to fight against Knuckles, Shoot, and Meruem all simultaneously, during that fight he was able to put Shoot in critical condition after less than 20 seconds of combat. Mind you, Knuckle and Shoot were the 2 hunters that Killua and Gon had to train against to prove they could go into the NGE. They were highly competent, highly powerful Nen users, and they didn't stand a chance, but that's hardly a knock against them, as Colt genuinely believed that Youpi had a chance to defeat Chairman Netero, widely regarded as the strongest hunter of all time. And pretty much the combination of Knuckles, Shoot, Meruem, with additional help from Killua and Moral, were able to do was almost force him into a state of Zetsu using Hack-Aware. I mean, the only person who was able to consistently land any blows on him was Killua using Godspeed. And even though Killua was faster than Youpi at that moment in time and able to land blows, those blows didn't really amount to anything in terms of damage. It just allowed for Killua to piss off Youpi to a point where he was forced to use his Rage Blasts. But everything about this character was disgustingly broken. He was able to destroy the world's most famous staircase in one blow, shaking the entire palace with the power of the strike. He collapsed the entire tower that he was in the palace by striking the ground. And oh yeah, he was a shapeshifter with complete and total control over his body. Whether that was turning into a centaur, sprouting wings, turning his arms into blades, growing eyes all over his body, he could basically do whatever he wanted. And all of this falls under the category of enhancement. Maybe. See, technically putting Youpi in here is kind of a controversial pick, because as to whether or not Youpi's abilities are an enhancement ability or a transmutation ability is a pretty hotly discussed topic. See, transmutation usually applies giving a distinct characteristic to your Nen. Think Bungee Gum or Killua's electrification of his Nen to get things like Godspeed. However, Youpi doesn't necessarily transform his Nen, he transforms his body, which seems more like an enhancer ability, but could be considered a transmuter ability. Now, I do tend to consider him an enhancer, but I can't say I blame you if you say he doesn't belong on this list. Anyways, moving directly forward, if we are assuming that he is an enhancer, it's important to note here that Knuckle assumed that Youpi had 10 times more Nen than Moral, a 1-star hunter, implying that Youpi had somewhere in the region of 700,000 aura units of Nen. On top of that, his Nen output was said to be greater than that of even Netero's, which is probably why Colt believed that Youpi would be able to defeat Netero in a fight. But being ridiculously strong and ridiculously fast aren't the only things that make Youpi ridiculously, well, I guess strong. See, he is able to transform his body into basically whatever he wants, but apparently one of the things that he can transform his body into is a giant mass of energy that wipes out everything when it explodes. Also described as his Rage Blasts. See, Youpi realized while the extermination team was taking him on that as his anger grows inside of him, it turns into actual energy that causes his body to bubble up. And when his rage reaches its apex, it explodes in all directions, leaving a crater a few dozen meters in diameter. However, when Youpi eventually unlocks his Rage Incarnate form, he's able to channel these Rage Blasts through his left arm that he's turned into kind of a Rage Laser into the form of a beam. So yeah, simply based on the fact that basically nobody was able to fight against Youpi or do any damage to him, and the fact that Colt, who really has no reason to lie, assumed that Youpi would be able to kill Netero, we gotta put him pretty high on this list. But not higher than somebody who was once considered the world's strongest Nen user, because coming up at number 3, we have Maha Zoldyck. Now, we know really next to nothing about Maha Zoldyck, outside of the fact that he is Zeno's grandfather, making him Killua's great-great-grandfather. And while we've never seen Maha in action, he still, as somebody's great-great-grandfather, goes out on missions, as he was sent out with Goto and Illumi to kill the 10 Dons. However, what we do know about Maha is that he's roughly the same age as Netero, and that he was so powerful in his youth that Netero genuinely considered him to be the strongest Nen user on Earth. And as Maha is the only person to ever challenge Netero to a fight and survive the conflict, that seems like a statement with some pretty substantiative evidence. But outside of that, the only thing we know about Maha is that he is an enhancer. So Is he as strong as Netero was in the Chimera Ant arc? Probably not. Was he ever stronger than Netero? We can't say, but it's safe to assume at the peak of his power, he was one of the strongest people in Hunter x Hunter history. But since we're talking about some of the strongest people in Hunter x Hunter history, next up on our list, we have Netero at number 2. Yes, Netero at number 2. Now listen, I understand what a lot of you are saying. Oh, but Nick, Netero's talked about as being the strongest Nen user of all time. And you're right, he is. Even at a self-identified half strength in his battle against Meruem, it took Meruem being struck hundreds of times by his Hunter-type Guanyin Bodhisattva for Meruem to finally land a blow on Netero. And even after losing one leg and one arm, Netero was still able to strike Meruem hundreds of times with his Hunter-type Guanyin Bodhisattva, even being able to scoop up Meruem and hit him with his Type 0 hand, a technique that unleashed all of Netero's bottled up aura into one final attack. However, even though Netero was able to attack dozens of times a second, faster than pre-Rose Meruem could react to, unfortunately he did next to no damage to Meruem. Even his Zero Hand, which was one of Netero's last-ditch attacks, only caused surface-level cuts on Meruem's skin. And yes, Netero had some insanely impressive feats even before his battle with Meruem, like reacting to Pito and launching them so far that they had to use Dr. Blythe to stop their flight dozens of kilometers away from where Netero hit them originally. Really, when it comes down to it, Netero's most impressive feats happen in his battle against Meruem. And while Meruem is ultimately the reason that Meruem does die with his Dictator's Rose, we can't really equate Netero strapping a dirty bomb to his heart as part of his strength. But yes, Netero's strikes with his 100-type Guanyin Bodhisattva were easily supersonic, as he was able to launch dozens a second, and the ability to even scratch Meruem implies that Netero's AP at half strength was somewhere in the region of City Plus. And maybe, just maybe, if Netero was at peak power, he would have been able to beat Meruem in a fight. I mean, the man's been to the Dark Continent twice and survived both times. Something that literally no one else in history can say. However, on account of the fact that Netero was barely able to injure Meruem, I have to put him at number 2 on this list. With our number 1 entry being our prodigal main character of at least the first 300-ish chapters of Hunter x Hunter, Gon.
Nick, what are you talking about? There's no way that Gon, even in adult form, is as strong as Netero.
And honestly, that's kind of fair. Listen, I'm not gonna sit here and say that adult Gon would have been able to kill Netero at his peak power. It's a fight I'd like to see, but it's not something I can guarantee. However, what we do know is that adult Gon was able to very, and I mean very easily, dispatch a Pito. Even when Pito tried to launch a surprise attack against adult Gon, all adult Gon had to do was turn around and punt them up into the sky, so long that Pito had a second to think about their decisions. And while yes, Pito is eventually able to rip off one of adult Gon's arms, that's after Pito dies. That's using post-mortem Nen, which is insanely broken, and thus the strongest member of the Royal Guards using post-mortem Nen was able to injure adult Gon. But after adult Gon was injured by an already dead Pito, he literally took his own arm and pierced Pito's corpse with it. And while I understand that adult Gon is not a replicatable feat, as he had to make a Nen restriction to use all of his potential in his lifetime to achieve this form to defeat Pito, Pito did look upon this form in fear that adult Gon would be able to kill Meruem. And as Pito was literally a Nen prodigy who knew exactly how powerful Meruem was, mind you, as Pito had been struck by Meruem and survived, there's really no reason for us to believe that Pito was wrong here. If the fangs of adult Gon could reach Meruem, and Pito willingly gave up their life to make sure that adult Gon was wasted on them, then it's not crazy for me to sit here and say that adult Gon was stronger than Netero, at least at half power, because Netero's fangs could not reach Meruem. See, because while Netero definitely had a speed that adult Gon most definitely did not have access to, adult Gon's Jaw Ken was able to rearrange Pito's face into a bloody mush. And considering the fact that a tail strike with the intention of decapitating Pito barely injured Pito from Meruem, the fact that Gon was able to invert Pito's face implies that adult Gon most likely would be able to punch with a similar amount of AP as a serious Meruem, at least pre-Rose. So do I think overall Gon is a more powerful enhancer than Netero? No, not really. But if we're talking about peak strengths, I believe there is a legitimate argument to be made that adult Gon is stronger than Netero, because we don't know what Netero's peak looks like. Yes, we can say 2x his power, but it's hard to 2x his power when the only opponent he ever fought against seriously was hardly trying against him. But if you want to say that Netero is the most powerful enhancer in the history of enhancers, be my guess. I got a tattoo of him for a reason. I love him. I mean, I also have a tattoo of adult Gon, so I guess my bias kind of goes in all directions. But what do you guys think? If you had to write a list of the most powerful enhancers in all of Hunter x Hunter, who would be on it? Let me know in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I guess I'm gonna wait another 9 months for more Hunter x Hunter content to come out.